Hello, my name is Scott Rushton, and I'm here to introduce Stormloop's first built-on Workday product called Multi-Tenant Security Audit Central. Today, I'll go over the application's goals. I'll review key questions that we're trying to answer with the application. I'll review the application flow in a very basic diagram. I'll provide detail of what you'll see in your Workday production tenant, including the view of the Multi-Tenant Security Audit Central data. And then I'll do an overview of the delivered visualizations that are included in application installation. And finally, I'll overview some add-ons as well as future enhancements that are available with the application. The goals of Multi-Tenant Security Audit Central are quite simple. The first goal is to protect client data across all Workday tenants. This includes implementation tenants, this includes sandbox and preview. It's important to remember that these tenants contain production data. There are direct refreshes from your production environment, and unless scrambled, are exact matches to what's in your current production. Typically, users have access to additional security in those tenants for project or support purposes. Our goal is to protect that data by monitoring and tracking activity as well as access in those environments to make sure that you have full transparency into what's being accessed outside of production. The second goal is to keep that data available for longer. So we are extending the lifespan of your non-production data by keeping it available in your production tenant. So the tool pulls data from your non-production environments, stores it, and allows you to report on it in production. That data remains available even after the tenant's refresh. So Sandbox, as everybody knows, refreshes weekly. Imagine accessing Sandbox activity or security data 4 weeks later. Right? What happened in Sandbox 4 weeks ago? You'll now have access to that data. And then lastly, we want to make that data, which is fairly complex, very easy to see, very easy to act upon, and very easy to report on. So we do deliver some included visualizations as well as an add-on service to be able to report and act on the data that's returned in the application. Some basic questions that we're trying to answer here. If your data security is compromised in a non-production tenant, how would you know? Test tenants typically don't have notifications turned on. If they do, they're not monitored every day. So there's really no way to actively know what's going on in your test environments unless you have somebody actively monitoring those environments. The second one is if a terminated worker or a consultant that's been rolled off attempts to access a test environment to pull down old code or review configuration after it's appropriate, how would you know? Unless you're actively monitoring the sign-ons and attempted sign-ons report, or you completely lock them out manually from each and every tenant, you would have no way of understanding when and how they're accessing your test environments. It's very common that consultant accounts, right, as a Workday partner, are left on in non-production, right? We're simply deactivated in the production environment. Although we're not authorized to access, we still could, right? And we tell our clients to offboard us in all tenants, but not all clients have the manpower to be able to do that efficiently. So you really have no access to any sign-on attempts unless you're manually tracking that information. There is compensation and security data in non-production environments unless that data is scrambled. There's no way to know which workers are proxying or changing security so that they can access unauthorized information. That's currently not available unless you're manually monitoring that information in each and every tenant. Our goal for Multi-Tenant Security Audit Central is to pull that data into production and make that available for you across all tenants in one place. And then lastly, and most importantly, is any of this data available to you after refresh? The answer is no, right? After a tenant refresh, you can no longer access your sandbox environment or your implementation environment. So any suspicious activity or bad actors that act in an implementation environment will no longer be visible after the tenant's refreshed. The intent of our application is to actually pull the data into production environment and make it available for longer. If you find out that something happened in Sandbox a month later, with this application, you now still have access to the activity and the access that happened in that tenant 4 weeks ago. That could be 4 refreshes later. You'll see this in the demo in a moment. Here's a very brief overview of how the application works. We can support more than 3 tenants, but I have 3 tenants here for simplicity. The Multi-Tenant Security Audit Central application pulls data from each of those tenants. It gathers it in your Workday production environment, and then it presents the data very efficiently for your users for monitoring, configuring alerts, and then any trend reporting over time, which I'll demonstrate. So it's a very simple flow. Each tenant is supported through one application in your Workday production environment, and then it's presented to your users and also included in some delivered visualizations. How that data is presented happens on the Logs tab. You can review each tenant separately, or you can select a custom selection in which you can select several tenants or just one, as well as the date of activity and access, right? So I'm going to do basically year to date. This is running in one of our test environments against other test environments that Stormloop has. So the data is presented in a delivered way. We have 5 tabs. The first tab is user activity. I can see some activity in some of our test tenants around security. I can see some permission changes, and those are happening in Sandbox and Impl 2. The only way to see this without the application is to actually log into Impl 2 or Sandbox, but this would be your production environment. I can see who did it, when they did it, the IP address they did it from. Currently, we have delivered activities that are included in this report, but in a future enhancement, we will allow users or companies to select the activities that are tracked. Same is true for security groups. We currently include all security groups. You can see here the changes. You can see who made the change, when they made it, the tenant, the type of change, and then if it involves a worker, you can actually see the worker that's involved. So here we can see Logan McNeil assigned Andrew Walton to HR administrator. Logan did that in Impl 2. Why did Logan do that? Well, if that doesn't look appropriate, now we have grounds to reach out to Logan to say, hey, walk us through the security changes that were made. Here's a history of all security activations that happen in each of your tenants. This includes not only the user and the date and time, but also the comment. Right, so it looks like just recently we had some changes to inventory analyst in both Impl 2 and Sandbox. Danica from our team made some changes in Impl 2. And then Anthony from our team made some changes in Impl 2 as well. We did this intentionally, right? Some feedback here would be that if you have security activation comment requirements, we would say that this one does not say who did it. We prefer to have that in the comment. This one, we all know who did it, but we don't know what the intention was. So this is an opportunity to consolidate all activations and then present that to our team to say, here's where we need to improve. We list changes to specific domains, edit permissions, and then lastly, we list all sign-ons. This includes proxy attempts as well. So we can see all sign-ons, the tenant they signed into, when they signed in, when they signed out, the IP address as well. So if you had any suspicious activity or any suspicious sign-ons into a tenant, you can see that all in one place. And this access will be preserved after the tenant refresh. Here's an example of a proxy. If I go back to view logs, I'll return back to where I can see multiple tenants at once or tenants individually. And if I click this overview tab here, which is also available on the left, I see some delivered visualizations with this data. Here you'll see sign-ons by tenant, Impl 1, Impl 2, and Sandbox. Can be seen all at once or individually. We have our top signed on users in each tenant. We have proxy volume. Right? Maybe you're not expecting anybody to proxy in Impl 1. Well, one person proxied on 221 and one person proxied on, or 2 people proxied on 225. Why is that? Right? You now have access to see that even if this is weeks in the future. We have delivered security and compensation tasks that we track in each environment. Again, you can see all at once or individual tenants by clicking. We currently deliver these tasks, but in the future, we will allow users and clients to select the tasks that are tracked. The transaction activity chart actually shows multiple elements in one chart. It tries to simplify and reduce the total number of visualizations, but you can see domain activity in Impl 1. You can see sign-on activity in Impl 1. Overall user activity in Impl 1, as well as security activations, right? So there have not been any security activations in March in Impl 1. You could do this across all tenants in the same chart. This is meant to just observe trends of multiple data points in one chart. And then lastly, changes to any security groups. Right? So you can see these changes are tracked here. You can click them. You can also see one tenant at a time or implementation. Right. So in Impl 2, there was a lot of compensation data changed. Why is that? Maybe you have a benefits or a financials project going on there. It might be worthy of exploring. So we're trying to equip client security teams with access to data from multiple tenants in one spot, and we're trying to extend the life of that data beyond tenant refresh. So if there was suspicious activity in Sandbox, you no longer lose access on Friday night. On a separate call, we can review the administration of the applications, but we tried to make it as simple as possible for our users. And then finally, I did review some enhancements already, but we are going to provide some additional visualizations of the data. We are going to allow client selection of various data elements so that you can pick, for example, specific security changes here. And then we're also going to offer add-on services such as review and recommendation based on the data results, and then configuring things like alerts. An alert example would be, imagine getting alerted anytime there was a security activation in non-production. Hey, Logan McNeil just activated security in Sandbox, right? Just goes right to the security team. If you're not expecting Logan to be in Sandbox, well, now you're going to get alerted right away when she makes a security activity in Sandbox, right? So that can happen as soon as the integration runs, right? Alternatively, you can monitor the app manually to look for sign-on and proxy access through the application's UI. Those are just some of the basic enhancements and add-ons that we have planned. We're looking forward to delivering this app to the ecosystem, and we're excited to come out with future apps as the Stormloop Technologies integrations team continues to grow.